Hey. All right. So, what I want to know is what's the perfect thing to go with coffee? And the answer is donuts. But also, good thing to go with coffee is a mug to put it in. It could also be tea or hot chocolate or water or um, pre-solidified jello or whatever floats your boat. But the idea is we have a mug here that we're going to be creating, and the mug is slab built, and so it's going to have a very flat surface to begin with, and it's going to be a cylinder. And so one thing I want to do just to begin with is take a look at what mugs could be like for height. Quite a big difference. This is small. This is quite large. You also have like tall and skinny or tall and wide. So there's definitely different options when it comes down to mugs. So you want to think about how big do you want to make one. Personally, I love the huge mug. There's something great about it. And so that's your call if you want to go with a big mug. If you say I want it to be a little bit smaller, that's fine too. We're going to have a minimum of 4 inches, so that way we keep it at least somewhat large. If you say I really, really, really want to have a smaller one, then I guess that's going to be a second one that you make for yourself. But for the one that we're going to make, I want to have some sort of a cylinder shape. And so I need to figure out how big the diameter is of the space inside. And so when I look at this one versus this one, quite a huge difference. And so one thing you could do is you could look at some different vessels in your own house. They could be glasses or mugs, anything to kind of see what is the diameter that you see there. Also look at the thickness of it too. Generally we're going to be working with about 1/4 of an inch, which is the same thickness as the sticks you have, the rolling guides. And so as we do this, I want to figure out how big do I want it. Now I'm going to need to go and collect something that's going to give me a diameter that I like. So I'm going to go searching for some things. Now I do need to caution you when I look for cylinders, I want cylinders that are actual cylinders, straight up and down, and it doesn't have extra little stuff. Now this has a little metal ring in the bottom, but it's not that big of a deal. This is a big deal. That sticks out a lot, and then it gets really narrow, and then sticks out a lot. That will not work. I don't want that. This would work. This is a maybe, but then I look at it, I'm like, well, it does stick out a decent amount right here. Also, it has this funny bottom, and that's going to mess things up a little bit too, so I'm going to throw that one out too. Be sweet if that blew up right now. This might work. Now, this is really big, so this is comparable to like my largest mug I have. It's definitely that big, so if you want a huge mug, think of something like soup. But you might want to think more narrow as well. So I got some wipes here, and that is a little bit more narrow than what I have here. Now it will shrink, remember, so if I want it to be exactly that big around, then I have to make it a little bit bigger. But if I'm okay saying I want that big round, but a little bit skinnier is fine, it's okay too. So come up with what you want to use as your cylinder to wrap around, because we're going to actually use that object to create a cylinder to help hold its form while it's in the process of building, and then we'll take it out later. So, I guess I'll begin and choose. Spray can is a winner. I like the diameter there, and I like that it gives me the options to go as tall as I want. Some things that I found were a little bit on the short side, and so I didn't love that, and so I like that I could go super tall if I wanted or somewhere in between. We're going to have a minimum of 4 inches. So, I'm going to use this object. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get a piece of paper, and you can take it out of a sketchbook or any other paper you have. What I'm going to do is wrap it around and make sure that I can make it all the way around. And I can. With some of the round cylinders you find, it might be on the large side and you might not be able to make it all the way around. Like let's say you cut off part of your pool noodle because you're weird that way. That one just barely makes it around with this. I think the paper is 12 inches long. So that does make it. Chances are you're probably not going to be much bigger than that. But this paper is going to work is what I'm seeing. Now, to make my height, I want to figure out on here how much I want to do. And if you have a measuring tool to actually see what that height is, or else you can just kind of eyeball it and say I want it to be a certain amount. Now, I do want to make a rectangle, and so I'm going to make my mark, and then I'll show you what I can do with it. All right, so I decided that I want my mug to be about this tall. So what I'm going to do is I want to fold it over right there. And I really want to check that it looks like it's really level, and one way I can do that is make sure that this edge is lined up nice. And then as I go along, make sure it actually looks like I kept that. It appears to be parallel. So that's one way you can accomplish your parallel lines. Another way would be to measure it a certain amount on both sides, connect them, and then cut it. So I now have my height. Again, remember it's going to shrink. Now about how much? Think about 10%. So if it was 10 inches tall, when you make it, it could shrink down to being 9 inches tall. So do a little bit of math on it if you want to know how much it's going to be shrinking down. So now I have this, and I'm going to go ahead and wrap it around my part. Okay, so I have a rectangle, and I'm going to wrap it around can. And I'm going to mark it where it overlaps, so I can see where it's overlapping right there. And I can see both, and so now I know how big that I want it to be. And so I'm going to go ahead and cut that off. Okay, so made my marks. Now, if you're going to do this and have it just right, I'd recommend being a little bit slightly bigger, just because it'd be nice to have a little bit of wiggle room there. So I now have it ready to be. I can cut off the extra stuff. Okay, so now I have a piece. This is how big I need to make when it comes to clay. But let's go ahead just for fun and see how this looks. Take my rectangle, wrap it around and make the ends touch. And since I want a tiny bit extra, it gives me a little bit of overlapping that I can do. Hold it together better. Now I can see this is my mug on the inside dimension. So it is going to be a little bit thicker, so it will be a little bit wider than that. Imagine if I'm doing a 1/4 inch on both sides. In other words, it's a 1/2 inch wider than that. So this gives you a really good sense of what it is you're making. If you look at this and go, that's not what I want, make your adjustments now. If I want it shorter or taller, or if I want to find something that has a larger inner diameter as this. Now it can be deceiving sometimes when you do it. When I put it into a mug, I can see how narrow that is. I can go, okay, so that's definitely more narrow than the one I have here. So you can compare it with some other items you have in your home to see if you're working with one that's extra thin. Like I found that in this case, I can't fit it in there, so I know it's going to be bigger than this one. Now, if you wanted to go all out, you could make a whole handle and everything like that. That's your choice. Okay, so now that I tested it out and I know that I'm happy with it, I'm going to keep this piece, and that's going to be my template. In other words, the piece that I can use to create it out of clay. So now I need to figure out what on earth I'm going to do, because some things I do, it would be better if I did it early on. In other words, if I were to do something to the clay that is better while it's laying flat, then I'm going to do it while it's laying flat. So, in other words, it's time to come up with our idea. Okay, so I decided that I'm going to use a texture that's all across the whole thing, and then I'm going to have circles that kind of float, little orbs that kind of float around. Now, I do want to keep in mind that it is full circle, so whatever I put here will be right next to this, and so if you have concerns about it looking right, then test it out. I'm trying to decide how many circles I want. Now, I'm not making perfect circles for the sketch, but for the real thing, if I want them to be perfect, then use something that's going to give you perfect. All right, and so again, I can double check this and make sure I'm happy with how it looks as I go around. And if I see some things I don't like them right next to each other, then I can make the adjustments. Like I could say, oh, no, I don't want that there. I want to make the move over to here. So drawing with a pencil gives you this chance to make changes as you go. And I'm ready. Now, I decided I'm going to do a texture here. And I'm going to use a different found object here, and it is a dryer ball that came from Dollar Tree. It's just basically a sphere that has a bunch of little knobby things. And this just points to the fact of it could be anything that creates a texture. And so if you want to use the stamps you made earlier this year and actually stamp those in, that would work. If you want to find objects around the house, that's your call. So I'm ready to roll.